welcome. Budget 2011 presents an opportunity like never before. The government may be rocked by scandals, but its stability is not in doubt. Inflation may be sky high, but so is economic growth, which continues to be robust despite fears of inflation. India Inc. wants to seize the moment. All it needs is a gentle push, maybe a nudge. Will Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee have the stomach to deliver reforms at least now? This is Budget and India Inc. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy, and joining me today is a very special panel. I've got Mr. Rajan Mittal, President of FICCI and MD of Bharti Enterprises, joining me live from New Delhi. I've got Ms. Swati Piramal, Director of Piramal Group, joining in from Mumbai. Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, CEO of Infosys, also joins us today. And I've got a very special guest here in the panel, which is Mr. Habeel Khorakiwala, Chairman of Wockhardt Group. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today in this panel. Mr. Rajan Mittal, I want to start off with you. You've been tracking many budgets over the years. Probably for the first time, we're not so worried about fiscal deficit as we are about governance deficit.
Well, let me say this, as the budget is being presented, there will be many issues which will be addressed. I don't think so we should be reading far too much on the policy making decisions only basing on the budgetary exercise. So we have to be really clear, and from India Inc. point of view, I think while the growth momentum is sustainable, we are seeing the growth pattern the way it has been going around. Yes, there are some challenges, there are issues of inflation. There are also challenges in the issue of going into the next level of reforms in few of the industries. So I hope that will be kept in mind. We'll also keep in mind while budget is being presented that the stimulus packages that have been given earlier are maintained, because while the recovery in India is going fine, or probably the growth is going fine, but recovery outside is still fragile in part. So we must keep that sentiment in mind, and I'm sure other issues will be addressed in the coming budget.
But Ms. Swati Piramal, it's tough to ignore the backdrop of this budget, the fact that it's happening at a time when the government, in a sense, has been rocked by scandals. Surely it will have some kind of an overhang even on the budget?
Yeah, I know, but last year as president of ASSOCHAM, I went to 20 states and talked to a lot of large and small businesses. We ran a national economic awareness program. The people want tax reforms. They want the government to go forward quickly. They can't wait till the GST really gets implemented. So actually on the ground, small and large businesses want the industry to move forward and with efficiency. They want to compete with the rest of the world. So I can see the finance minister has to take cognizance of that and move up reforms.
All right, move up reforms. We'll talk about some of the specific issues that you raised a little later. Chris Gopalakrishnan, let me bring you in here. I know it's tough to ignore all this talk about scams, but specifically, what is your big expectation from the finance minister this time around?
From my personal side, there are three things I look for, and one which is more about streamlining the application of laws and things like that. We need clarity, we need less friction to business. So first is implementation of the policies and clarification in a timely manner, such that the industry does not go through long litigation, appeals, etc. The three things I look for are investments in education, investment in infrastructure, and to make sure that governance is simplified, and when a rupee is spent on a particular project, 100% of that goes to the project. In the area of education, we need to continue to invest because the industry is growing, the whole economy is growing, and we will require trained manpower. As the knowledge intensity increases, this trained manpower will have to be educated also. So we have to increase the quality of education and the quantity. Second, on infrastructure, we have to make sure that access to rural areas, access for supply chain, and life in city becomes better. So infrastructure is very, very key. And the third is governance, e-governance, making it simpler for people to access government services, public services, and things like that.
Right, Mr. Khorakiwala, let me ask you the question that everybody wants to know. Will this be a populist budget, or will it be a pro-reform budget? The fact of the matter is that public sentiment is a bit weak right now because of all that's been happening over the last couple of months. Do you think that the government will then use this as an opportunity to come ahead and deliver a populist budget, or do you think it will realize that this is the best time to strike with reforms?
I believe this is for the government the last time, because it is a third year. and next couple of years the election would be there and one would tend to become a little more populist. So I believe the government has a last opportunity to come with a big bang. And they can do in many areas. First, I think we should not take the growth for granted. 8.5% growth we predict, and we did well, and because I think there are a lot of other indicators which is coming negative for the growth. So I think the growth picture should be kept in mind. The second aspect is this government is spending a huge amount on social sectors, several 100,000 crores. So I think since the corruption has become a big issue, and it is going to remain for a while because we have a lot of corruption in this country, use this opportunity to bring about some kind of reforms in the delivery of some of these social sectors spending which is taking place. And I think another opportunity available is major reforms, both in the industrial sector, in terms of divestment significantly one can do because the market is now down, but it's going to pick up in any time. And government should be ready to do a big reform. And that will strengthen India's position in terms of deficit and other things what we have. And they will have more money available for the social sector reforms.
Right. Chris Gopalakrishnan, Mr. Khurakiwala here believes that now is the time for reforms. Do you believe then that this will be a pro-reform budget from Pranab Mukherjee?
I believe, we have been on the path to reform, and every single budget also moves in the same direction. I expect that, the reform process will continue. We will look at continuing to grow at a rate of 8 to 10%. I think that is very, very important for us to create new jobs, for us to make sure that, the growth story positively impacts more and more people. We remove, more people. We move more people from, lower income to middle income and things like that.
Right, Rajan Mittal, Mr. Khurakiwala here made a very valid point. The government should not take growth for granted. 8.5% growth is surely good, but it shouldn't take this growth for granted. Do you agree with that assessment, and that the government should, in a sense, do something to stimulate that growth going forward?
No, I'm quite certain in that sense that government understands that this growth is not for granted, and that's where, as Chris has said rightly, every budget has seen more reforms. We are hoping that this will be a balanced budget, growth-oriented, and of course inclusive. And I can't agree more on Chris's point that education sector is extremely key. When we are going to have a couple of million people joining the workforce every year, and that's where India requires the skill sets and the vocational training to be done. So I think government needs to keep that in mind and invest, as it did in the last budget, both on the social and physical infrastructure, and leave the business reforms to be more open, more transparent, so that the next phase of growth, that the few industries which are still not opened up in this country, that takes shape, so the more investments can come in, more job creation can happen, and inter alia that would mean percolation of the wealth and distribution of the wealth and inclusive growth. So my belief is government will keep that in mind. After all, the growth story, which is now back from 6.5 to 8.5%, needs to keep the momentum in the coming years. So I'm sure the finance minister will keep all of this in mind when he presents his budget.
All right, on that note, let's slip into a break here. But when we come back, we'll talk about the tough decisions that Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee needs to take in this budget if it's going to be a pro-reform budget. Come right back. We're back in a moment.